All right, good. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Jean.
Hi.
It's good to see you
Just,
too.
just getting in the car. I should be home before it's over.
Okay, that's all right.
I
Yeah.
I got my book too. I'm so excited.
Oh, you got it. Okay. And where book 3 is just starting to get printed, by the way.
Well, all right.
Have that in a couple weeks. So, but anyway, we're gonna go through kind of the next part of the fall of man, which is a very critical to understanding God and understanding our own situation. I think historically, Christianity has sort of started with kind of the conclusion of the fall of man. Basically, they don't have really a principle of creation, and there's not really a clear understanding of the fall, just eating the fruit, right? But they're kind of the real kickoff seems to be we're all sinners, right? We have all kind of sin, and we need salvation, right? We need to be saved, and that's very true. But we are so blessed to be able to have further revelation of the fall of man at this time. So I will I'll go ahead and share my PowerPoint and with the notes, not in the slide presentation form, but just in the regular form. So let's see, am I set up for sharing yet?
Oh, sorry. No.
Share. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so this is actually, I think we had the fall of man divided into definitely more than one presentation. We actually had it when we presented it in 3 parts. So this is the second part, and again, we kind of covered some of the topics last week. So if everybody can see that screen?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. So one of the questions that was on the flyer that was produced, the PA helped to design with the questions that we gave him, was this question: what does the fact that Adam and Eve covered their lower parts after committing sin tell us, right? So the story of the fall is after Adam and Eve ate the fruit, right? Which I guess it's traditionally defined that that's a sin. It was a sin to eat the fruit. Why? Well, maybe we can discuss that a little bit. So Christians would say it was a sin to eat the fruit, right? The fruit of the tree, the knowledge of good and evil. So why would they consider that a sin?
Because God told them not to.
Because God told them not to. Okay. So normally when we think about sin, in Judeo-Christian tradition, we think about things that are like some kind of immoral act, right? Like telling lies or cheating or stealing or killing or something like that, right? That we say, okay, those are different kind of sins, jealousy, whatever. So, but if you think about it, this just kind of came to me, yeah, God told them not to eat the fruit, but what is it about eating a fruit that's bad, right? It was, or why would there be a particular fruit? Was it the fruit itself? I think the Bible does kind of try to hint a little bit different way. What did the archangel, or what did the serpent tell them would happen if they ate the fruit?
Their eyes would be opened, knowing good and evil.
Right. And so what's wrong with that? What's wrong with knowing good and evil? What does that mean? I mean, if I'm just kind of taking it directly from the Bible, from the biblical viewpoint, and maybe it's not something that because we kind of really know what the fall was more substantially, but what do you think when people say, their eyes would be open knowing good and evil? Why would that be why is there anything wrong with knowing good and evil, or wanting to know the difference between good and evil?
Well, that's so strange that Lucifer would say that, because if they would not eat the fruit, there would not have been any evil to in the first place.
Right. That's true. It is a strange question. If there was no evil yet, right? So why would he say your eyes will be open? Anybody? Dr. Pereira, any thoughts on that? Yes.
Well, I think that the idea of sin and especially here is become separated from God. And the serpent proposed a different view, basically saying three things: God is a liar, God is selfish, and God is an oppressor. I mean, this is this is right out of the book of Karl Marx. uh, Therefore, in doing so, her heart was separated from God, and God is the source of life. So if you separate from God, you don't have life.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, again, the whole says, oh yeah, God, you won't die, right? That was what she said,
Yes.
oh, we can't eat it because we'll die. And he said, no, that's not true. You won't die. In fact, your eyes will be open, you'll know all kind of things, right? But again, it was all centered on this fruit, so-called fruit. So again, uh, you know, what kind of sin is that? I mean, other than the disobedience of God, right? So it doesn't really identify what that fruit itself was, or why eating, was there really a fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? And of course, in Divine Principle, we go through and explain what that was. So, yes, we'll talk about that here and I'll pull that up on the screen here. So, we want to try to identify and really understand what's going on in the story of the fall. And again, there were two trees in the Garden of Eden, the tree of life, and then there was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Right. So the principle of creation, we see in the Bible sometimes a tree symbolizes a person, or a tree or a vine with branches symbolizes a person. Jesus said, I am the vine, you are the branches. And so I won't go into all the detail, the basics of it, because we've gone through that. But the other tree is that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which symbolized the other person. There were two people in the garden. One was Adam, and one was Eve. And what Eve was tempted to eat the fruit from was, well, Satan tempted her to eat the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So we say that this tree represents Eve herself. But then what was the serpent? And I think this is pretty common knowledge in Christianity, that the serpent was the Lucifer or the devil. Although, so there's different kind of interpretations of that too, because sometimes, especially when I see like movies, Christian movies, they'll often show that that it was actually a snake or a serpent in the garden, right? That started talking. So what do you think? Does it make sense that this was a literal snake or serpent? So if you describe somebody, you say that person is a real snake, right? What are you talking about, right? So this I think if you think about a lot of these stories in the Bible, there's dreams, there's revelations, they're often symbolic, right? So serpent symbolizes, of course, the archangel Lucifer, who became Satan, he was thrown down and became Satan. But did he need to appear as a literal snake in front of Eve? Or did there be any reason for him to show himself as a literal snake? Or did he maybe just show himself as he was, and his character or his behavior more like a snake or serpent?
Well, if you want to go literal, I mean, God told him he was going to be basically he'd be crawling around on the ground, and because the the woman's heel will bruise your head, so he maybe I don't know why they think it was a snake before that snake was talking to Eve. Maybe he became it looks like he became a snake after the fall.
Yeah, or like a snake. But yeah, if you think about the why would Eve trust Lucifer and listen to him, right? If it's just some kind of random snake that just shows up, crawling around in the jungle and just crawls up to her and starts talking to her, no other animals talk. Why would she
Yeah.
believe this snake? Or does it make more sense that Lucifer looked like an angel? He looked like actually a person, spiritual person, spirit being who already knew Eve. And often we compare, Lucifer, the angels were servants, right? The Bible says they're servants, the human being, and that human beings are meant to judge the angels. So the angels were servants, created to be servants to human beings, right? So he's a servant around. He must have already gained the trust of Eve. So again, the Bible story is very short, right? It's just a very short story, just a couple of sentences. Okay, the snake came up, the snake said this, she said, okay, it's over. So what do you think really happened? Was it like that? Was the whole thing like a 5-minute deal? Based
Oh,
on
I see what
based
you're
on what we
saying.
already learned about the fall.
Yeah, he was like grooming her for a long time, gaining her trust.
Mhm. But what could we compare it to, right, in modern society? Some things that happen so that we get a more realistic understanding.
Hmm.
Are there ever situations like that in real life?
Well, there's all kinds of traitors, betrayers.
How about specifically in terms of like you said, Fred, grooming kids? Dr. Pereira?
No, I was going to say, yes, especially today, there is lots of that going on
Yeah.
through pedophilia, and one of the paths, one of the methods for pedophilia is for to establish trust. So, I'm on your side. I'm telling you things that can help you grow, help you become important, help you would know what's going on. And that takes time. And there is a certain methodology, you know. Like I said, God is a liar. So that has to do with logos. God is oppressor. That has to do with the heart. And God is selfish. That has to do with creativity. So little by little, you dismantle the trust and the faith that the child has in God. But eventually, he goes for the kill, just like a serpent.
Yeah, and I've heard there's situations now, especially if we think of this, one of the things the archangel Lucifer, the angel of light, right? So he was kind of an intellectual and like a teacher, teaching Adam and Eve about the creation. So there's a lot of teachers these days, the parents send their kids to school, and then the teachers start teaching them stuff. Oh, your parents tell you that God exists? Well, we know from Darwin that God does not exist, right? Oh, your parents tell you there's only two genders? Oh, no, 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 no. There's many different genders. Oh, your parents tell you that you shouldn't have sex until you're, married. Oh no, that's not, you should be free, free to express your sexuality. Right. So that's a lot. There's a lot of teachers actually, even in schools, who are functioning on behalf, acting on behalf of Lucifer, or in the same being.
Well,
Is that-
yeah. Are you sure you're a boy, Michael?
Oh, Michael. Big Mike, you're talking about? Okay. So anyway, yeah, just in general, right? Are you sure you're a boy? And yeah, does anybody know that the guy who, I guess it was in the 60s, he had this TV show called Mr. Rogers?
Yeah.
You may have seen some of the old videos. Somebody was playing that actually today. I saw some video of Mr. Rogers where he's explaining, if you're born a boy, then you'll always be a boy. If you're born a girl, you'll always be a girl, right? Teaching these little kids, right? Some of the basics, stuff like that. So, but now it's like the opposite. So you really have people who have been kind of, educated from Satan's viewpoint and are now grooming young kids to rebel against God, to rebel against their sexuality, to misuse love and things like that. Right? That's happening all around us, unfortunately. Okay, so it didn't really need to be a snake. It doesn't really make sense that it was a literal snake. It was Lucifer. I mean, Christians already know it was Lucifer, but I think the idea that the symbolism of the snake, again, even Jesus said, "I have spoken to you using symbols and parables," right? But one day I will speak to you plainly of the Father. So God spoke in the Bible many times using symbols and parables, and this is one of them. All right. So yeah, and even in the book of Jude here, we read how just as in Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, like the angels, it's talking about the angels who did not stay in their own position. So people like the angels likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural desire. So there's testimony in the Bible about angels misusing love. And again, yeah, we talked about this, the Bible quote, when the woman saw the tree was good for food, she took of its fruit and ate, and gave some to her husband, to Adam, and then he ate. And oh yeah, so this is also kind of a weird way of putting things in the Bible. It says the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. They knew that they were naked. So that's kind of a funny way to express it, right? So they eat this fruit and then they say, "Hey, I didn't realize I wasn't wearing any clothes." Right? And then, so why would eating the fruit make them be aware that they're not wearing any clothes? So what do you think is the meaning behind that statement? Because it doesn't make sense literally that they, if they were just physically naked and then they didn't realize that they weren't wearing clothes until they ate the fruit. So what do you think is the implication behind this? They knew that they were naked. How would you, if you were to tell it, without using symbols and parables, it's so after they ate the fruit, we also have this expression, the eyes of both the when your eyes are open to something, right? So what did their eyes open to after they ate the fruit?
I think they realized that they should not do that. That was wrong.
So it was wrong. So yeah, so they realized that they had done something wrong, but it has something to do with their nakedness, right? It says that they knew that they were naked. So they knew that they became aware that, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That was really wrong. And and they knew that they were naked. So what does that nakedness have to do with, okay, we did something wrong, we ate the fruit, right? We ate the fruit, right? Well, isn't that what they did wrong? No, it had something to do with nakedness, it had something to do with their exposed bodies. So what were they doing with their naked bodies? right? So I think, you know, it is pretty clear about what the fall was about, and they became ashamed of their bodies, right? And that by implication, that's their, you know, sexuality, their sexual parts. And why would they become ashamed? Because they misused it. And so when they misused it, that was the sin that they had committed, right? It's human nature to cover up what you have done, what you have sinned with. So, okay, yeah, here's a picture of the fall, before the fall, Adam and Eve, here sitting together naked and unashamed. Then after the fall, yeah, well, this is one of the, I guess, is that a kind of a Renaissance painting? I don't know if it fully captures the image there, but you know, this shows them with some leaves covering themselves up, their lower parts. So we talked about the fruit being in the fruit of the tree, the knowledge of good and evil, the fruit from that tree which represents Eve. Eating the fruit has to do with sexual relationship. And yeah, and here there's a quote from Genesis 4:1. Adam knew his wife. This is about the idea of knowledge, right? Adam knew his wife, and she conceived, right? So how many times have people become pregnant by, you know, getting to know them on the telephone, or, you know, having a conversation where you get to know somebody, right? Adam knew his wife. So that's kind of an odd thing, isn't it? Knowledge. So what is, you know, to know, to have knowledge of. So the only way is to have that sexual relationship. And again, that's in the book of Genesis. And so she got pregnant, you know, through that knowledge. Yeah. And again, here's this story in the book of Genesis chapter 19 about angels that you know, were going to have sexual relationships with the men of Sodom. There's another quote from the Song of Solomon about you know, comparing the sexual parts of the woman to being like clusters of the vine, breath like apples, talking about wine, things like that. And the evidence of the fall, you know, so people who protest and say, oh, that doesn't make any sense. I never heard that, you know, the apple could possibly be the fruit. You know, or sorry, the apple could actually be a sexual relationship, or eating the apple. But we see that kind of references everywhere around us, right? It's like everybody knows, and it's kind of in people's face. It's almost like even the satanic world, people know when they see the Adam and Eve store, they know what that is, right? They know that's a place where you know, for sexual things, right? Things having to do with sex. And you know, when somebody writes a book called Forbidden Fruit, right? Do people know what that means or not, right? Everybody knows what it's talking about. It's not talking about, you know, okay, we're not supposed to eat cherries, right? And yeah, and you have a I guess that was a series called Lucifer on Netflix. Everyone kind of, you already know what it's going to be about. So it's kind of interesting how the truth is so out there in the open, and it seems like everyone except for more fundamental Christians already knows what that means, that Adam and Eve ate the fruit. Everybody else knows, which is kind of opposite of, you know, you would think that Christians would know, right? So the illicit sexual relationship took place between first Lucifer and Eve, and then Eve and Adam, two parts. So let's see. Okay, so one of the other questions that was on the list, and let me just go ahead and get into that. It says, if Lucifer was an angel, how could he commit sin? If Lucifer was an angel, how could he commit sin? Aren't angels all on God's side? So among the people that you know, let's say you've spoken to Christians, you've gone to church, when people talk about angels, what is their concept about angels?
Pure
Well,
and
yeah.
obedient.
Pure and obedient, okay.
Right.
They think they're all good, right?
That's
Well,
the
that's
idea.
even,
Mhm.
yeah, that's
Oh, you're
even
an
a
angel.
slang. Yeah, exactly. It's even a slang. If somebody does something nice, you say, "Oh, you're an angel."
Right. So not, but again, as we let's see what happened with Lucifer, the story about Sodom and Gomorrah, and also what was it, some other quote about a third of the angels being thrown down from heaven,
Yeah.
things like that. So if you say that somebody is an angel, I think probably people who've heard the principle, you probably stop using that expression. I know I have, right? Or it has to be qualified, right? If you're going to say an angel, you don't want to accuse them of something wrong. So we know for a fact that, again, not necessarily angels are not necessarily godly and pure. They're not necessarily all on God's side, right? So one very important question. Let me see if this is coming up here. Motivation. Okay. All right. Okay. So the question is, if Adam and Eve were created without sin, how could they commit sin? Right. So we have to assume, I mean, people think that Jesus is the only person who came into the world without sin. Now, has anybody ever asked maybe one of your Christian friends, well, didn't Adam and Eve come into the world without sin also? So that means Jesus wasn't the only one who came into the world without sin, the only person. So what's the story there? So the question is, if they were created without sin, people, I guess Christians normally have the idea, okay, we are all sinners, right? Humans are sinners, so that's why we commit sin, because we're human, right? But humans are sinners. But Adam and Eve, when they were created, they didn't have any sin, right? God cannot create something with sin. So if they didn't have sin, then how could they commit the sin of the fall? They weren't sinful people. Well, we would say they didn't have fallen nature. So how could they commit sin then? There's one key element that goes back to the principle of creation, and that which is really the key to understanding God and man and the whole providence and the whole history of mankind, is the growing period. And that's something that, again, we take for granted. Oh yeah, people have to go through stages of growth, that kind of thing. But that is such a key point, which actually explains a lot of things. Because without understanding this, you can't really understand the fall. You can't understand about, Jesus, what Jesus' mission was, the history of restoration. So what do we learn from the three stages of growth? What would you say the primary lessons, especially related to the fall and to history?
Well, we need to obey the commandment until we reach the top of the completion stage. And then we won't need it. That was something interesting. I was listening to Timothy Elder on the original substance, there was a question about that, and Timothy Elder was saying we had to be careful to think that, just because we're a blessed couple and we may have reached the divine spirit level, that we won't fall, but it's because the environment that we're living in is sinful and we can be influenced. In the original way, if there's nothing to support sin. If Adam and Eve would have done their job and their responsibility to obey the commandment, when they reached the top of the completion stage, it would have been impossible to fall. But he's saying now we're surrounded by evil environment, so we can't relax.
Right.
When you become a divine spirit, you can still be influenced.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Yep. Personally, I would tend to think that people, even though we may, believe in God and try to follow a principle life for a period of time, I don't know about if anybody has achieved that state of, purity, oneness with God. I think my
Um,
my observation or understanding is that we're all somewhere still, all of us are still in the growing period. That
Yeah.
Christ is able to go through, and on the personal level, as long as he can resist sin, he can reach that perfection, that oneness. But all of us carry such, deep and historical sin that it's not gone. I think it takes generations. I've heard things like, it could take, even 7 generations or more to go through this kind of purification process from generation to generation before people would be able to reach that state where they're completely one with God.
Well, that's very reasonable, but it's still a goal, isn't it? It's a good goal to have. I
Oh,
want to be
yeah.
a divine spirit
Yeah.
in my lifetime on earth. Let's go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. But I'm just saying that I think that a lot of we are surrounded by temptation, and it makes that whole growing process a lot more difficult because we all have all these different kind of hooks. And then when we're surrounded by the kind of evil spirit world around us, which is multiplied, and right now, especially in a corrupt, immoral culture, man, it's everywhere, right? Surrounding us. So it's like walking through, what if fathers say it's like wearing like long white clothes and trying to walk through like a muddy pool without
Yeah.
getting dirty or something like that. Very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. So we strive our best and hope that we can reach as high a standard as possible and pass that on to others as well. But the thing is about, I think for me, why the understanding from the principle of creation of the growing period is that human beings, including Adam and Eve, were not created already mature, already perfected, that they were still immature. And as long as people are immature and have not reached that oneness with God, there is that possibility that they can fall. And we say the same thing about, so that happened with Adam, who was sinless, but it also happened with Jesus, right? In the sense that he had to go through the growing process. Now, Jesus was tempted, but he was able to overcome and reach that oneness with God. But the point of having that, free will and responsibility explains a lot. Dr. Pereira, you want to say something?
Yeah, if we think of sin as the um, separation from God, okay, again, that's the sin of separation from God. Then at the very moment of creation, God gave them a warning that yes, this is a paradise. Yes, it's beautiful, but it's dangerous. it's so dangerous that it might kill you. So even though, yeah, they had not sinned yet, but they certainly had the potential to sin. So maybe even after we complete completion, we still have the potential to sin, but we have overcome it so many times that we can't sin anymore. But that is more like
I guess
uh,
you're saying that we even if we reach that level of maturity or perfection, we still don't lose our free will,
that's right.
right? We still have free will. So theoretically, it would still be possible to sin. But when we have the level of maturity where we love God and we're totally um uh dedicated, our heart is totally with God, no matter what would happen, we would never betray God and commit sin. Doesn't mean that we don't have free will to commit sin, though, right?
Yet it might be a different way of defining completion. If you say completion is the kind of situation where there you are surrounded with so much love, you have so much love that you just cannot even conceive of step away from a loving relationship, which would be sin.
Right. And if you think about it too, as far as the concept about maturity, so we say that ideally a human being would reach that level of maturity where they would be basically beyond that this, the level where they could experience temptation, and they would be married and they would have a family, that kind of thing. So let's say, we say 21 years old, right? You ideally, if you were in a pure environment, 7, 14, 20, 3 stages of 7 years, and you reach that maturity. But even if you reach that maturity where you're in a state of oneness with God, you still grow and mature, right? In other ways. I think you still grow and mature as a mature citizen, as an elder person. You gain a lot of wisdom and things like that. But you've already, but the first 3 stages of growth, I guess, is where you're able to conquer or achieve that certain level where, again, your love for God and when your loyalty to God is such that you would never betray him.
Yeah.
By committing sin. Yeah. But anyway, that whole point that Adam and Eve were in that immature state, very immature. Of course, they were not, they had not had sexual relations before. They were not married, even though there's that reference to Adam as the husband, but I think he was created to be her husband. But they were, there was no indication that they, up until that time, that they related to each other as husband and wife yet, right? They were not in that level. So as a result of the fall, again, they instead of continuing that process of growth and maturity to reach that absolute character of love, they fell to a level below the formation stage. So how could they how can a person fall below the beginning, below the bottom? What does that mean? What do you think?
Well, it's as you said.
Okay.
As you said, they were created sinless. So when they sinned, and they were when they were worse off than when they were first born.
Sorry, yeah, Vicky. Sorry, Vicky hasn't spoken yet. She was going to say something too.
I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking in my mind because lately I've had some Christian friends of mine I've known for years, but sometimes we'll bring up things that we'll discuss. And I guess sometimes, when you're talking about the fall, I think too, when we're talking about a level of maturity that Adam and Eve needed to go through, I in my mind, I'm thinking, well, how mature was Satan? How mature was Lucifer? Because the one thing to me that the angels and humans have in common is the one word love, because they could feel love. And I think in my mind, love itself is such a tremendous force. It just, it can make people do crazy stuff. I mean, I just think of, that feeling of love, it can be quite powerful to pull someone this way or that way. But I don't know. In my mind, I'm always thinking about different things. But I wondered about Lucifer's maturity as well, because he apparently, to me, felt extremely jealous, and then he sees Eve, as beautiful as she is, and longs for that, or feels like he's lost his position. And then, but I guess in my mind, I'm just thinking, love is quite a force. I don't know, any thoughts on that? I'd like to hear a little bit.
Yeah, Dr. Pereira?
Um, I think the approach that the angel came to Eve was not that he was offering love to her, but he broke the relationship that she had with God by insinuating that God was basically lying to her when he says, if you eat this, you'll die. He says, no, you're not going to die. And also, he also said, God just doesn't want you to be like him. In other words, be like God. In other words, he wanted to be the only one occupying that position and keep everybody else in the dark or in a situation of oppression. So if I think if you're going to kill somebody's hope or faith in someone, you've got to follow those 3 steps. Point out that the person is a liar. Point out that they're just oppressing them by denying them that possibility of growth, and also doing this because he wants to be the only one. And eventually, there might be some emotional relationship between the two, but his approach to her was to make the other guy bad. I'm not saying I'm good. I'm just saying he's bad.
Does that mean that Lucifer believed that God lied to him? If somebody believes that you have a close relationship and then somebody lied to you,
That's right. Yeah.
does that mean that he could justify his lying to Adam and Eve? He believes that God lied to him, so now he can justify that. So I can lie to Adam and Eve. Does does that make sense?
Well, they certainly had a history where Lucifer was kicked out from paradise. So yeah, there was bad blood.
Yeah, although, I don't know if Lucifer actually believed that God lied, about things, or that was just kind of the excuse he used. Sometimes when you want something and then you kind of, and you're upset or you're resentful towards somebody, you kind of make things up about that person. And I think, when Lucifer was telling Eve about God lied to you, he's trying to hide things from you or whatever. I don't necessarily think he didn't believe that God lied to her, but he knew that he could use that to get to her.
Oh.
Right? If you wanna convince somebody of something, you just say, hey, so and so lied to you. And I think there was also an element, I mean, definitely there's that kind of spiritual element of convincing Eve that she was being tricked or God lied or was keeping something from her. But there's also definitely then that kind of opened the way for that sexuality to become a part of it. All right, Fred's got
I think that's a very interesting point that Ellen brings up, because, divine principle explained that Lucifer was his motivation, like he was shocked when he realized that God loved Adam and Eve more than him. So this whole time, Lucifer was receiving all of this love from God. He was the central point of love. So it's maybe not by words that God lied to him, but maybe he felt betrayed by God. God lied to me, like, oh, I'm not that important anymore.
Mhm. Yeah,
May I add a
that's
point, Alan?
yes.
Yeah, it's this. Eve didn't die. You see what I'm saying? She ate it. She did whatever she did. And she didn't die. So it was for her to believe in God, even if she didn't die. And then we say, well, actually, there was a death, but that came later. And so Lucifer could say, well, that, as I told you, he wouldn't die. There it is. She's still living.
Right. But at the same time, I wonder if she
And
felt,
sorry.
no, I was gonna say, yeah, she felt such a a horrible darkness come over her. Right? She may have sensed that kind of that spiritual death, even though, she may not have called it that. But she felt, okay, something really terrible just happened to me. I've lost that joy, that feeling of love from God.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was, I think, yeah, she didn't physically die, but I think they could sense that, God's spirit left them. Somebody wanted to say something, Vilma?
Yeah, and I think also Lucifer actually he probably believe what he said, that God lied, because he separate from God's love. Sometimes I'm thinking about the situation of Mother Han. I think that she's really believing what she's saying. And I think when Lucifer separate and he is like he start to, that is, he gets self-centered, and then he start to really believe that God lied to him. He started to put in himself, and he told to them, because he separated, he get out of the state of grace to feel that love, because he was betraying. I mean, this is my mind, my conclusion, that actually I think he was really believing, because his separation from God's love and God's grace, he started to really making that his true, and his true was self-centeredness, because he put himself in the center, and he feel that way. This is my conclusion, I think.
I think that's a really, really good point, Vilma. That makes a lot of sense, because there are a lot of people, even in the world today, in society today, that believe all kinds of evil things, right? They're convinced, and then they teach other people, or they teach the children, they teach students all kinds of evil things, and they believe it themselves. Right, they believe this evil, right? Like the transgender and LGBTQ stuff and communism. They believe that that's true. They believe God doesn't exist or whatever, and then they teach to other people. So Yeah, just one other thing, maybe because it came up, I'll just briefly address it, and then getting kind of towards the end of the hour. People were asking about the maturity of angels. How mature was Lucifer? I think, yeah, Vicky, you brought that up. About how mature was Lucifer, right? So I've always understood, from through the principal perspective, and I don't have the quote directly where that comes from, was that basically the angels spiritually would not mature except through the receiving love from true human beings. So they would be satisfied and fulfilled and actually mature, complete themselves through human beings, that eventually God would create female angels to be their partners. Because obviously these male angels, they had sexual parts, they could commit sexual acts, they had sexual desires. So there must have been some plan, right, that God had to have partners for them as well. So that's another aspect. But yeah, they were not mature either, right? But regardless of the immaturity of the archangel, who was given the commandment? It was Adam and Eve. It was their responsibility, and that's kind of the main point. I think the principle emphasizes it was the human being's portion of responsibility, regardless of what Lucifer says or how he tries to lie to them or trick them. They should have remained faithful to God. We don't. People like to blame Lucifer or blame the archangel. Yeah, what he did was bad, but whose responsibility was it? It was Adam and Eve's responsibility to keep the commandment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So